Hey, buddy. It's me.
Dude, come downstairs, man.
I'm upstairs.
Hey, man.
I brought snacks.
Sweet.
So, yes.
Awesome.
Where these land is where they have to stay forever.
You're putting on my freshly clean coffee table.
So it's a nice coffee table you got going for you there.
Hey, man.
Hey.
How you doing? Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been...
Where you been?
It's been a beat. I was just working. You know.
Working for the man.
Yeah. But I found an interesting factoid when I was at work.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Apparently there's a local YouTuber that also does gaming videos on YouTube.
A gamer YouTube channel local.
Local, yeah.
Interesting. What's the name?
The name is something like Retro Rivals.
Metro... What?
No, Retro.
Oh, Retro. They didn't even have rivals in the name. That's like dropping the freaking gauntlet.
Yeah.
If ever there was one. So you found out about work. Like, so you just work with the guy or something? What's the chances of that?
Well, apparently he's on another shift, but yeah.
What? So he works with you, this other guy.
Yeah.
Or potentially. Although you've never worked together. But.
Well, I work the graveyards and he works the day shift, so.
What a coinky-dink.
Yeah.
What a coinky-dink. Cool. Well, let's check them out.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's Retro Rivals. They actually even did a video where, yeah. Oh, looky there. There's a shout-out video. They want people's opinions on something.
Huh.
So we come up with 5 questions here that we're gonna present to you guys.
Yeah.
And we want you to add in the comments what you think the answers or what your opinions are on
Or-
everything. And we're gonna discuss between ourselves what we think.
Yeah, and if you guys feel inspired by this topic or any of the questions,
Oh, we invite
feel free to make a
we
video
call
about it.
open tag, is that what
Yeah,
we're
an
calling it?
open tag.
They want to know what we think.
Well,
This is an opportunity. Let's watch a little bit more.
yeah.
I don't think you're going to see many people 30 years from now and say, oh yeah, I finally beat Dark Souls. And we're going to be like,
Maybe.
what the why didn't you beat that 30 years ago?
Yeah.
All right, folks, welcome to the show. We have a good one for you. I am your host, Widied. This is your other host,
Pfarcus.
We're the Aged Gamers. Today we're just going to do a bit of a show centered around a rebuttal set forth by the channel Retro Rivals. They have basically did a little channel-y shout out to some people about some retro-based questions that they felt like could be good for the community to kind of absorb and then spout back what they think. And so we were like, we got some thoughts about stuff. We're not really retro gamers per se, but we thought that might be the interesting aspect to it.
We hope.
Because we are old. We have played all those games.
We're retro.
We are retro, yeah. But Pfarcus, I know you kind of have an interesting story about how we ran into these guys, because I didn't know of them at all. And then
Yeah, so at my day job, undisclosed day job,
yeah,
basically when I was working with a new guy, he said, we started talking and I mentioned that I have the channel, and he said, oh, there's another local guy that works here that also does a channel. And I'm like,
what?
Yeah.
What are the chances that 2 local gaming giant icons of the gaming industry would work at the same day job that they just do because they are already filthy rich at their YouTube lives? So they put some fun vibes out there, and they do like all kinds of random crazy stuff. They usually drink beers, which actually, matter of fact, I feel like we're not doing it right for this episode if we're not drinking beer. Can we like summon beer? Can we? Is that something we can do?
let's try.
Well, let's give it a try.
Let's try.
Well, I feel like we failed this one. we didn't quite get beer.
We got iced tea.
We got iced tea, a lot of it, which is cool. but with some beer. So we are going to be sober and a whole lot less excited. No, this is our tribute to them and also a tribute to their questions. So we're going to, seriously, I think it's like, what, 5 questions?
5 questions.
And we're going to go through it and share our opinions. So yeah, why don't we start with that?
What do you consider to be a retro game? This is a question that I think is a little subjective.
Oh yeah, we got to actually drink this. Yeah, partake in the old retro rival style here. Get my beer on.
Iced tea beer. Tea beer.
Ah, tasty. So what do you consider to be a retro game? So that's kind of like what system, what era of, so for you, let you take a first step.
Well, for me, I think when I think of like what makes a retro game, I think kind of blocky graphics and kind of steps away from photorealism is what kind of delineates it in my mind. Something like like the stick figures of the NES world, definitely. But for the cutoff point for me, I think anything from the Xbox 360 era upwards, I feel like they started to get graphics so good that like you could take a PS3 game, and as long as it's like one of the better looking PS3 games of that era, it could pass as a modern game.
That's actually a really good point, and I'll jump on that because I actually am going to agree with you. I think like the cutoff is the Xbox 360 / PS3. I think that kind of, and GameCube. Let's just lump the GameCube. Yeah. I think games that were made on those systems generally follow the same archetype of building games that we see today. Like, so there's like, even though obviously the graphics that got better and the length of the games and all these different sort of aspects of the games that got better, but you can see the building blocks being set for what we play now in that era. I don't think before that, like you start seeing like, first of all, like N64 weird controllers. So like the archetype for even how that controls is different. But even the early, like all those earlier systems, I think when you look back, PS2 and the games function and look different. Like you even think about the original Final Fantasy game, right? Like Final Fantasy VII just got remade, and there's a significant difference. It's not like at all the same. Like things that were posing as people in 7 just didn't. They were like blocks. They're like giant weird things, and so like a lot of the older games required the strictest attention to imagination.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, like I remember in the NES days. It's kind of funny now, but like when you were a player, you kind of had to extend your imagination to kind of live that fantasy. And I even remember hearing interviews with some of the developers at the time, how like the little pipes in the original Mario Brothers are supposed to actually be like portals and warps, but they didn't know how to do it technically, so they just kind of threw in a pipe as like a placeholder. And then they started talking, they're like, oh, there's a pipe, maybe he's a plumber. And so they kind of had this really fun problem-solving kind of mentality where you kind of had to extend your imagination. And for me, that's the mark of a retro game, is when you have to use your imagination. Like, I feel like a modern game, like when you have, like when you can see, like in the new God of War or whatever, when you can see the dude's pores in his skin, you don't really need to imagine anything anymore.
Number 2 question on the list is the value of retro versus modern games. That's an interesting question. That's a tough one in a weird way.
Yeah, and I want to have to this is where I will politely disagree.
So frame what they said. What the heck did these retro rival people say? So
they commented on how, like, if you spend, like, let's just value them each at $100, just for hypothetical. They mention how if you're spending $100 on a new game, you download it, it might not work. There might be day one patches.
Okay, I'm going to agree with them on that point.
That's
annoying.
It definitely is frustrating. And then they talk about how, like, if you spend $100 on an old game, it's meant to work out of the box. And I think there's validity to that point.
That's a very good point, actually.
But one of the things that I kind of do disagree with it a little bit is I feel like to tread new ground, you always kind of have to to experience something new. There's always that discomfort of experiencing something new. There's always, like, if game developers are trying to do something that's top of the line, very, like, modern, it's never been done before, it's obviously going to always be kind of a little bit broken by being new ground that they're treading, right? Mm-hmm. It's always going to be kind of, and I feel like that's something you have to kind of factor in. And now, don't get me wrong, some games are just inexcusably broken out of the box or incomplete out of the box.
Cyberpunk.
No, I had a very fine experience.
You're the one person. But it's an interesting question, though, like the value of retro. So, like, if I think what they were saying was essentially that if they spend $100 on an old game, they know they're getting something of value that in two ways. They're going to get something that works out of the box, is kind of what they framed. And also, like, they don't have to worry, like, the quality assurance is, like, they had to do a lot more to make... Well, I don't know if they had to do a lot more, because arguably there's way more to building a game now than there was back then. But still, it took some effort, and they made sure it worked. Because if it didn't work out of the box... And that would have been a bit of a dumpster fire for sure. Yeah. But they're also saying kind of quasi that if you buy a retro game, you're also buying a game that has retained a value. Whereas like you buy these new games and, you know, you can take it to EB for like $2 and a high five.
Yeah.
And,
well, I think that's also subjective in the regards that like today's collector item was the newest game when it came out. Mm-hmm. Right? So something like Resident Evil that's coming out, it's kind of hard to fathom, but in like 20 years' time, that is a little bit of a retro. It's going to be a retro game. It's going to be a collector's item. So I don't feel like being brand spanking new really kind of erases the possibility of that being kind of like the collector's item, the inherent value. I think it's just a matter of being smart with your money. And I do agree with them that there are some modern game practices that maybe could use a little bit more quality assurance or definitely could. But again, I don't think it's necessarily the norm. Like for every one Cyberpunk, there's like Resident Evil 7 that was fine when it came out. There's Dirt 5 that was fine when it came out. There was Gears of War that was fine when it came out.
So I don't necessarily think the retro games are any better or worse. It's just more of there's games like if it comes out tomorrow, you better believe I'm paying full price. Like Dark Souls, anything Zelda. I like 35th anniversary is gonna break me. Like I'm buying everything because I love that franchise. Like, and I've owned it a billion times. So it's like, but it's just that's what I do. Like when my value for retro is attached to the things that meant something to me. I don't necessarily go buying retro games to buy retro games. Unless I really want to play that game. Like if there's a game that's like, oh man, I missed that. I think it'd be cool, but I'm not gonna go buy like. Just some random retro thing.
That's kind of the reason why I disagree with them slightly, because there's been a few times where there's been like retro packages that come out, like the Castlevania and Contra are two recent examples that came out on the Switch where they didn't really... It wasn't really a re-release. They literally just gave you the game, like
just
running on an emulator kind of thing.
Yeah, the emulators.
Which we'll get to in a second. But I kind of felt ripped off by the game a little bit. I hate to say, because I ended up paying, I don't know what it was, $40.
$12 for mine. On sale.
But I spent money on these games, and then I played them, and I was reminded of how far controls have advanced since then, and the games just played like a tank that it was brutal. And like when you were a kid and you didn't know any better, it was like, yeah, this is great. But now that we've had better controlled games, playing something like Contra or Castlevania, like the Castlevania dude moves like he's running like through molasses.
He jumps and he puts the whip straight out. It's garbage. But like back in the day, though, like it's hard to say. Like, see, what's so funny is like we have such different opinions and stuff about this type of stuff because we grew up with these games. We played the crap out of them when we were young. We beat them when we were younger. We did all this stuff. We have like Hammer. We just played them to death. Like, and so I can look at those games fondly in the rear view mirror. But like, I do have a hard time sometimes going back. And there's some games that are just timeless. Like, I can turn on Zeldas and just play goof off in all the Mario games. Like, there are timeless games, but there are some games where this doesn't deserve to be played ever again. It was fine for the time, but like does not age game. Like I played what was that game we both played actually a little bit of? It was like Wayne's World on Super Nintendo. That was terrible. That was terrible. It should be burnt and nobody needs to play it. Like there's legit wasting your time. And that was wasting my time.
We tried it. We had an emulator box that had a bunch of games, and there was Little Mermaid, and we couldn't even figure out how to get to the end.
Oh, Little Mermaid's cool. Little Mermaid's the shit. Don't be talking terrible, my Little Mermaid.
The game's terrible.
What's the third question, my good man?
So I mentioned emulation earlier. There's a question that I do think is kind of interesting, and
hot takes.
We have a few hot takes. And that question is, when you play a retro game, is playing through emulation cheating?
Well, That's an interesting one.
And the way that I describe it is that question is a little bit like asking if driving a car is cheating when you could drive a horse. I guess in some ways of thinking, but because I think the reason why they asked this question is because emulations come with a lot of things that the original game did not include that
was not able to include. Let's just put it. It's not that they didn't include it; it's that they weren't able to.
Yeah,
like if anybody could have put save points, I think they probably would have.
Yeah, and some games maybe they just couldn't figure out how to get the save function to work properly in the game or whatever have you. But save states.
It's also the point of a lot of those old games. Were made with a different mentality than games today.
Yeah, like I talked about earlier when we were talking about this, a lot of those early games were actually made kind of as copies of arcade games, and arcade games are meant to just suck up your quarter. They're not necessarily meant to, make you feel like you saved, you walk by next week, and then you pick up where you left off. It's meant to, no, you got to put in another quarter if you want to play any further.
And those games weren't all that sophisticated. No. They were... puzzly things, but okay, but back to the question though, is emulation cheating? I'm going to pick it up here and say, I kind of causally agree with the man on this one, and I think both of them had basically roughly agreed to this. No, I think Jen is her name. I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry, Retro Rivals, I'm horrible with names. I don't even remember this guy's name.
Who am I?
At the time.
Who are we all, really?
Okay, I have a funny story. So I love Mega Man. Mega Man's one of the ones one of those ones I just talked about that I attach value to because those games I really loved. And so I bought Mega Man 11 when it came out, and I also bought the Legacy Collection on the Switch, and I started playing with it. And I noticed that my reaction times aren't quite what they used to be. Actually, they're pretty terrible compared to what I was. But I know I beat these games. I remember doing it. It was me and my cousin. We would just sit there all day and leave the system on, go eat supper, come back down, and then pick up where we are until we beat the freaking game. So I get what he's saying about there's kind of this weird gauntlet thing of. Back in the day, the system was you had to beat it in a run, or you don't get to beat this game. That's literally what it was like, and. You know what? I can't do that anymore. I don't know if it's a matter of time. I don't have all the time as I did as a kid. And, and this channel, our channel, is a bit more dedicated to, leveraging how to be an adult and continue to game. Because, there's a unique set of challenges that come with that. And one of the nice things about that recreation for me that I actually really appreciated was all the lame rerun features, because I don't think I could have ever beat that game again as an adult. And some of that's just because I don't have the time to sit there for whatever amount and memorize all the different things. And so, but I really wanted to replay, for nostalgia reasons, this game in my head, even if it's just to see it. And I kind of get what he's saying. I didn't really beat the game. I just refinished it. And yeah, it's kind of true. But for me, that was actually kind of good. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Am I lame? Probably. Am I terrible at Mega Man again? Or at least now, because I was good at it one time.
Well, that's why I compare it to horses versus cars, or maybe let's say the Model T Ford, very first car versus today's cars.
Traveling a horse would suck, man. Your balls would get all sore. Your ass would be you never want to sit down on anything ever again. Imagine having to drive across the world on a horse would be a totally different experience. Don't do that.
No. I'm not even going to touch that.
Yeah. Anyways, keep going.
Moving on.
Keep going with your analogy that I've destroyed.
My point is, modern cars have so many features that just make life easier. And, for example, backup camera. If you use a backup camera, are you cheating at backing up? Well, yeah. I guess you could say that, right? You're not really, training yourself to be good at backing up if you're relying on a backup camera. But on the other hand, should we just call backup cameras cheats? Should we call GPS devices cheats because then you're not using a map? I guess.
So I guess maybe what we're getting at is that it's not cheating. It is the evolution of things.
That's kind of my point, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we're going to say that we don't consider emulation cheating per se. Because I think at the end of the day, you're still doing the challenges. You're just not as hindered by the technology as you once were. And honestly, I do think the reason why they don't have save states isn't because Nintendo was fuck you, people that love us. They're no. they just couldn't do it, they just didn't have it. Like easy ways to do it, especially on NES. I think Super NES is when they started putting the technology in the cartridge that they could actually
there was
have
the
saves.
Odd game of the NES, but the way they did it was weird. They had like have to do like a battery pack on the cartridge.
Yeah.
So it did make it a little more complicated than today, where it's just like probably with 2 lines of code and then boom, you're done.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
like, that's stupid easy. Yeah. And I mean, I'm gonna tell you, it did definitely feel like I was cheating when I was rewinding through Mega Man. I'd be like, okay, I do this thing and I jump over the ball and I'm like, oh, rewind. It took me a lot of times even with rewind. But like at the point I wasn't trying to be like I was literally just reliving my youth. I'm an old man now. So I was just reliving those games. And those games were really hard challenges, like not trying to like downplay that. Like they were, and there is something I do think he does kind of have a quasi point about, you know, if you're gonna just stay true to how it was back then, and I do think there is some value to trying to do that, especially if you're going to consider. I wouldn't, like, if you were going to tell me, like, if we were going to have a championship, the Mega Man Championship, Mega Man 2 Championship, because it's my favorite, Mega Man 2 Championship, and then the guy that beats it with emulation, and you have the guy that didn't beat it without emulation, the guy that didn't beat it without emulation is definitely the top dog in Mega Man, dude. He's getting all the rewards, but I still think the other guy beat it. It's just, you know.
You know what that made me think of is playing pool, and the reason I say that is like if you're good at pool, there's like a lot of technical rules that you're supposed to call every shot in 8-ball. Mm-hmm. But when you play with people who just can't play pool very well, but you kind of bend the rules a little bit, and yeah, it's cheating, but like otherwise you're going to just swamp the floor with everybody, kind of thing. Yeah. But if you play at a tournament level, then all the rules are kind of strictly enforced, and I feel like it's that kind of thing where like. Are your friends cheating when they don't call a shot? Well, I guess if you really want to be, you know...
A stickler.
Stickler.
I do think there's a pecking order, though, and a hierarchy, and I can give them that. I'll give them that. I don't think it's cheating. I think cheating's too strong of a word.
Maybe. Yeah.
But I think, like, you could definitely, like, if you're going to rank best among the best, you know, then you can go that route and say that that's the type of thing.
The best
part of waking up
is iced tea in your cup.
I guess so. Cheers. You're supposed to drink customarily after you cheers, FYI, and you're not supposed to just put it on your crotch and call it a day. So the fourth question on the list.
When did you learn to count?
When did you learn to count?
Is when you count. Is it worth it to beat a retro game in 2021? Forever. Let's just put it up there. Into the time. Is it worth it? Is it worth beating a retro game? I have an interesting perspective. I'll let you go.
Okay, well, I think it is in the respect that, like, I think Grumbly Bellies. I think that's kind of like asking the question: is video gaming worth it in general?
No, this is specific retros.
I know. I was getting to that.
Okay.
Now I got derailed. What was I going to say? Yes.
Beating a retro game.
So I think it's a bit like asking if playing games is worth it, taken one step further where you're dedicating a little bit more time, because obviously those older games, we talked about how they kind of came from the era where they wanted your quarters really bad. So they had like a lot more of a kind of a twitchy challenge to them, where they wanted you to feel challenged enough so that you kept going, but wanted to crush you enough so you kept on putting quarters in.
Yeah, if you watch our channel, when we're not dying, which is all the time, we basically do, like, we have gone through a lot of our old memories and said that, you know, old games really weren't that sophisticated, like, in terms of what they were. They were basically the same sorts of puzzles and the same sorts of arcadey challenges. Yeah. Of course, that changes, obviously. Once that's Super NES, you start getting more, you know, RPGs and stuff, which are, you know, story-based thing. Anyways, continue on with your thought.
So I think it is worth it in the regards that, like, you're getting an experience out of pretty much anything you put your time to, right? It's like it's a bit like building a house of cards. Like, is it worth it to build a house of cards? I guess it depends on whether you enjoyed your time building that house of cards or not. And it's kind of the same thing with these games. Like, if you're getting to the point where you're throwing the controller at the TV because you've lost Battletoads for the 17 millionth time.
And that's about as many times as it takes to beat that game.
Screw Battletoads. That is the worst game. Well, it's fun, but
Battletoads hates you.
I don't think I think I've beaten it once with the Game Genie The cheats, all cheats enabled.
So you were really embracing the cheating early as a young. He didn't wait for emulation, man.
Game
You
cheating.
were cheating the whole time. He was like, "Fuck the shit, I'm cheating." Okay,
Right.
so I'll pick that point up and just run with it, and I say that beating a retro game, I think, in today's world, does have value, but I think more specifically, you could focus that question a little bit more and say, I honestly don't think necessarily just beating a retro game is randomly great. Like, I don't think even just gaming retroly, I mean, unless you really like maybe the art or something, you can go towards it. Like, to us, those games were a stage in the development cycle, right? But like, so to me, when I go back and play a retro game or try to beat a retro game, it either means something to me because it was a game I grew up with and I want to replay it for whatever value, or I have also done this, and I think this is actually a really good way. And I would actually say this is probably a good way. Not that I'm going to tell retro rivals what they have to do, but like, I actually think like this would be a really good way, because I know part of their show. So I'm going to get my thoughts together. Part of their show is a little bit about kind of teaching Jen. Sorry, Jen, if this is not your name and your name is Clarice, but I'm pretty sure it's Jen. I'm pretty sure it's mostly, or at least a little percentage of it is about teaching her about, becoming a gamer. And I think that's kind of a cool aspect of it, actually, because you get to see, like, the early, like, they're trying to figure out the best way to go about, bringing her up to speed, or, and I think that's what a lot of people tune into the show for, actually, after I watched a few episodes, is kind of, but there was some exciting parts about that. It was like, oh, crap, she gets to see this for the first time. And, like, so all of us old gamers that were, like, all crotchety and cranky, nobody plays those games anymore. But she kind of has, like, a renewed and kind of exciting vision. But I think, like, what you should do in that instance is maybe pick a series. Because, like, she really liked Tomb Raider, I think, was in one of them. Like, she really enjoyed that series. And I think you would have got a lot of value had you gone back and just looked at the old Tomb Raider games and then sort of progressed on to even the newer ones. Or just even pick it, you're like, screw it, I just want to play the new ones. The new ones are good games, but, like, I played all the old ones. They were good games, too. And so they'd be fine to go back and, like, you just see where the series progresses. And I think if you focus on that, because I do that a lot personally. Like, if I want to play a retro game now, let's say a series gets rebooted for whatever reason, I'll actually go back and try to look up maybe and play one of the older games to kind of like get a feel for the thing, get excited, get pumped, especially with RPGs, because RPGs are kind of timeless in a lot of ways. Most games are actually, a lot of Mario games. Like, there's a lot of timeless games. We're not trying to crap on retro. There's a lot of retro games that are just, they need to be burned and forgot. I'm sorry. Like, they're just not good experiences. They're clones of something else that's way better. Wayne's World, all those kind of ones. And they can be kind of fun to revisit, but you're not changing your life anymore. And honestly, but there is a lot of it. I'm like, obviously, we're not crapping on retro gaming. Our life is about retro. We have, like, this channel, we have lived these things, and I love so many franchises of games. And we're open to games, yes, Bane. So yeah, that's my point. I think if you focus and you pick, like, series, like, even, you don't even have to go that far back. You can even do, like, a series like Uncharted, for example, and be like, okay, instead of starting at, 4, which is the brand new one, which when I first got the PS4, I was an early adopter of the Xbox, and I didn't really back the PS4 until this guy was like, you need to learn the way. And then I got a PS4, but, like, some of the things, I hadn't had a PlayStation since the PlayStation 2, and so, like, I had so much catching up to do, so I played through the Uncharted series right from the first. I didn't perceive any difference. Like, those games were good, like 1, 2, 3, right up to 4. They're all good games, and so, like, that's a good way to approach it. Just do it by series. I think you get a lot more fulfillment than just playing a random retro game and a random retro game there. Like, I feel like that doesn't have as much meaning nowadays, to me, personally, because, like, there's so many good retro games that there's so many games in the back, like in the rear view, that it's hard to go back and enjoy them all without missing a lot of what's happening now. And I think there's a lot of cool stuff that's happening now. But I think, like, you should always cast an eye backwards, because, like, like I said, sometimes there's going to be, like, a recreation. You're like, oh, I wonder where that came from. And then you go back and you play those games. And that gives you a reason to do it, more so than just, I'm playing retro games, play retro games. Which I guess you can do. I mean, it's all, you can do whatever you want. I'm not the boss of you. You're not the boss of me either.
And you're not so big.
This is a total random thought, and we are nothing but a little bit random. Why don't we ever do drinks? Like, that's a really kind of just a generally good idea. We talk a lot on these. Like, we have podcasts. That's another thing we do. And we talk a lot, probably too much. And
We get parched.
I'm thinking, like, this these retro rivals people, they're like onto something. I mean, drinking beer, that's a little hardcore, but we tried. We just got iced tea, but I'm still liking the iced tea. Cheers. Can we do the cheers thing right? You can take a drink. Cheers. Cheers to the retro rivals. Good job. All right, so what's the last question all about there?
The last question is where the controversy begins.
Oh, yeah, we got some... Well, that's like... Yeah.
We have some thoughts.
I can see it right here, and that's a doozy.
We have some thoughts. So the last question they had is, compared to retro games, are modern games too easy?
Well, that's an interesting question.
So, on one hand, you have Battletoads.
Which hates you.
On the other hand, you have Sekiro.
Oh! What the fuck?
Which also hates you.
And I'm almost positive I can't beat Sekiro.
I'm like totally taking over this section just because... Okay, we did a clip at the beginning.
Oh, he has.
At the beginning, I have a beef here, Jen. You don't get to go and say that Dark Souls. Nobody will beat Dark Souls in 30 years. You don't get to say that without me watching you beat Dark Souls.
We have a challenge.
Well, you know what? No, the Dark Souls. Like, I have a lot of friends that won't touch that series because of how specifically hard it is. Now, we're going to go into this topic a lot, but you don't talk about my boy Dark Souls.
It's okay, man. It's okay, man.
Like,
it's okay.
How many times have I just said Dark Souls in the last 5 minutes? Way more than you've ever said a retro game. No, but in truth be told, like, there's some unfairness there. We have to dissect this question. This is why we did this video, when we're energized. And so, yeah. This question, let's contain this a little bit. So they're saying like retro games are easy or hard. Sorry, they're saying retro games are super hard compared to modern games. Modern games are meant to be beat. I would say there is probably about 40% truth to this statement. I think though it's really got rose-colored glasses though. Like I love you guys. I think you guys put good content out. Like I enjoy watching you, but. You can't say modern games are just void of challenge, because modern games, honestly, is such a huge thing. There are games that are just like the old games of yore. They still make games like that. And they also but gaming is just so huge in general. Like, the vast amount of experience is not even comparable. It's like saying that apple is not an orange or a banana. That's how hard it is. Because like modern games are experiences now in a lot of cases. And and then there's like games that are like roguelikes that are harder than a lot of games that I played even when I was a kid. I had not beaten Hades. I love Hades, by the way. That's a shout out to indie games. That game is freaking hard. And
so, I think...
Calm me down. Hold me back. Stop, man.
So, here's the thing. I can think of a list of games that we challenge you guys to beat.
Actually, I can think of one. That would be even a good one.
Sekiro.
Any Souls game, really, but Sekiro. No, Demon's Souls was a little easy. Demon's Souls was a little easy.
Sekiro is pretty bad.
Although there were a couple bosses that were fucking hard.
Sekiro.
But Sekiro, for sure.
Definitely.
Top of the list.
Binding of Isaac.
Oh, Binding of Isaac, yeah. That's a hard game.
And that includes the secret bosses.
Yeah, not just, you can't just beat mom and run away. You gotta go. You gotta go the way. You gotta go the whole way. Whole way, retro rivals. You want to rival us? We'll give you some stuff.
Binding of Isaac, Doom Eternal, including the DLC.
Oh, yeah, you're not getting out of that easy. Yeah.
Doom Eternal on hard mode.
On hard mode, yeah. You can, like, let's even add this. Like, you can really make easy games easy. Like, or make modern games easy by just taking, when you see the little choices there, and you're just like, I'm not going to do ultimate hard. I'm just going to do freaking super easy or average. Come on, yeah. Anyways. We're being jovial here, obviously. Yeah. We're joking, but we are more modern. We're more like retro dudes that are playing modern games. That's more of our angle. And, we do talk about retro stuff and all this. But, like, I do feel like that is a bit of an unfair statement. I don't think you can wrap up games, and like you said, all these games like Sekiro. Come on, Jen. You can't tell me there's going to be nobody in 30 years that has... I can tell you a lot of people that have just stopped playing games in general because of that game. Like, that literally game, that game, I think they had articles about people begging for an easy mode.
Yeah, Sekiro, the journalists actually complained that they were being cruel to their audience because they didn't have an easy mode.
I mean, nobody ever did that to Mario. Nobody's ever like, Mario, you're too hard.
And I think in fairness to the point, I think there are some games, because it's like you said, there's different kind of games now. Whereas like in the early NES days, everything kind of came from the perspective of the arcades. Everything kind of came from the perspective of quarter mongering, where they wanted you to kind of always be on the edge of getting beaten, so you kept on pumping in the quarters. Now there are some games that are just story based, like the Telltale games. Yes, everyone can beat the Telltale games.
Yeah, and to their point, that's why I said I gave them like a 40%, because I do believe like there is a percentage of games that are literally meant to be beat.
Yeah,
even if you put them on hard mode, there'd be no challenge.
Yeah.
But like, there is a lot of games that I think if you're not finding any modern games that are giving you a challenge, you're probably not looking.
We got a list. We got a list.
We'll go through it right about. Let's wait for it. Let's wait for it now. Right now is the list. You're gonna see a list. It's here. But honestly, though, like this question, I think is a little bit unfair to the medium right now. I think those games were hard. Don't get me wrong. Retro games were challenging. Like I just made a whole bit about like Mega Man and needing the rewind feature as an old dude. But you know what? The thing here is that those games, because I beat them already, I know I'm probably not really as engaged to try again as hard as I did when I was a kid. Because I have gone at games that I think have comparable, levels of difficulty with as much fervor as I did as a kid now as an adult, because they're new experiences. Like Hades. I love Hades. I put Hades on all the time and play that game because I'm dedicated to getting further, even though it is really, really hard. But also an awesome game. And Binding of Isaac was one we had a lot of fun with, especially when I bought the Switch. We both bought the Switch. It was like one of the few games other than Breath of the Wild that you could buy right away. And that game is hard. Like, so I think honestly, if the only reason you're able to say that is if you haven't really been challenging yourself to try to find hard modern games. So definitely are. Now those modern games might be games that are styles of games that you don't like, because games have evolved so freaking crazily. Like the Dark Souls games, I know a lot of people, in all honesty, and I'm not even just saying this because it's like one of my favorite types of games or favorite genres and favorite games franchises of all times, and you can say this about any From Software game. There are people who will not play those games because they are so hard. They just won't. And so I think either maybe Jen was like, because I noticed at one time the rival gentleman
Sir Rival.
Sir Retro Rival. Yeah. You don't say your names or put your names on your videos either, so very often. Anyway, I know Dennis. Anyways. It's
like a guest star.
Okay, yeah, he is. But the point is that like you could find really challenging experiences. I don't think I think he made a point to say Dark Souls, and I think she kind of just jumped on it to say it because he had just got finished saying, well, you know what, Dark Souls is actually pretty hard. And then she's like, yeah, nobody in 30 years will ever say they never beat Dark Souls. Yes, there will be. There are people that will say they never beat. There are people that probably played that game for like 10 seconds, said nope, and then put it back. I've
been trying to beat the last boss in Sekiro for almost a year now.
Yes, and I know a lot of people that struggle with that game specifically. And this is our challenge to the Retro Rivals, is that if you really want to put your money where your mouth is, you got to play some Sekiro on your Twitch stream and show yourself beating it before you're age 60. I don't know what that's that's a generous thing. Yeah. Let's get okay, but still, like, and like, I think Sekiro is a better one because I think a lot of people do actually kind of and this is actually kind of a funny thing because I'm getting a little bit. Like, I feel like people cheat in Dark Souls a little bit and they get like 5 of their friends to come in and help take on a boss. No, you got to play Dark Souls and you got to beat those bosses by yourself.
No summons.
No summons. No, none of this. Like, you.
In fact, we challenge you. If you beat one of the games we list, we will try to beat
Mike Tyson.
Whatever game.
Because that was a big one that he said. He said like he hadn't beat Mike Tyson when he was younger, and then he tried to do it later, and it was really hard or whatever. And so like there was that gap of 30 years that it took him to, Rocky music, and he was preparing and all that stuff. And I think I beat Mike Tyson. I know I did when I was younger, and. I guess I could prove it. No, just kidding. But you can't be talking bad about my boy Dark Souls and being like, I'm going to get out of this scot-free. This is not how it works.
I beat I beat Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, but I can't remember if he used cheats or not.
Well, we already established that he had a game genie, so anything he says is clearly just like there for filler. Like, this guy has no street cred. He was lost and all. He's like,
I did beat Doom Eternal
with a game genie. No. Yeah, I know. He did do the Doom Eternal thing. I don't think Doom Eternal is necessarily the hardest game ever, but like, it was a hard game. Like,
try the DLC.
To say it was easy is definitely not fair. Like, that game is hard.
The DLC ramped it up too.
Also, the other thing is that you can dummy down that game a lot by playing it on easy. Like, and I guess then let's give this a little topsy turvy to their additional questions about, is easy mode cheating?
Some people would say
in a modern game.
There's actually
Rivals. Here's a throwback question for you.
There's a YouTube channel I follow. Every time he mentions easy mode, he's like, "And if you play it, you're dead to me."
Yeah,
because he's like, "You got to put on hard mode."
That's a good question. So, like, I think a lot of people cheat modern games by just doing that. Like, but the thing is that modern games can still always aim to give you like a challenge. And I think the only way you're not finding these challenges is if you're not really looking hard enough. Yeah. And I think in this instance, Retro Rivals, as much as we enjoyed this conversation, enjoyed watching your videos, I think you're wrong. You're dead wrong. You can find modern games
that are super
that are hard, if not harder. Because, like, you have to think about it. Like, the experiences of these games, it's not just like, okay, I'm playing Mario, or I'm playing this, this crazy thing, like, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and it's this straightforward, like, I just pattern recognition. You have, like, a game like Dark Souls, it's pattern recognition because you have to do the boss fights, but then it's also like the exploration and like just like traversal and all this crazy. So it's like, again, comparing it's really hard, but I think if you just strip the whole conversation down to just challenge, I think modern games are harder actually in some instances. Yeah. I think if you look hard enough, because you'll think too, like those hard games that existed, right? Have you ever played Meat Boy?
I forgot about Meat Boy.
Meat Boy.
Meat Boy is evil.
If you're not
evil,
yeah, you can find new games that are gonna make you eat those words, and But the thing is that the also thing I think that they're not accounting for is that some of these people, especially in indies, I would say challenge actually most of your types of games that you probably would really like in a modern sense are indie games because they take the works of predecessors and then they're just like, that wasn't hard enough, ramp up to 10, here we go. And Meat Boy is a perfect example of that game. It's ridiculously hard.
I don't know if I can beat it.
It prides itself on being hard because it shows you all your deaths whenever you get through a level, and that's like part of the funny part about it. But yeah, so I honestly think, sorry guys, I don't agree with this one at all. I can't even find a middle ground. You're just wrong. Just wrong. Okay. You have an opinion. That's fine. But it's still wrong.
Except for 40%.
Except for 40%. 40% of it, I do believe that some games are meant to be beat. And you can actually play any of these games, a lot of these games. You can't play like many From Software games easy. There's no easy mode in From Software. I'm sorry. Dark Souls is just hard.
Yeah.
And they're meant to be hard for a reason. And but like Sekiro is damn right hates you as much as Battletoads. I don't care what anybody says. And
yeah, so I think we need to wrap it up before this guy loses a gasket.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank Retro Rivals for putting that video out. I think it was a neat idea. I also want to give them kudos because they do take a lot of time and effort into helping smaller guys like us, and smaller channels in general. And they're fun to watch because of that. They interact. They're very interacting, and they're very down to earth people. They seem pretty relaxed. So good job, thanks. And thanks for tipping us on that drinking is important when you talk a lot. And cheers to you guys. Keep it real. GG. That's a fuck ton of noise.
So yeah, I think it's a wrap.